Good morning, everybody. I'm Corey. He's Such. This is the Third Perspective podcast. This is episode 32. As always, any opinions expressed here are our own. Such, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. I can't believe we're already at 32, man.
Yeah, 32 before a scheduling conflict occurred. That
Yeah,
was pretty funny. I liked it.
such
But,
such things happen when you're working hard every single day. So, it happens.
well, or working, one of the two. Anyways.
Yeah.
So today, very, very, very exciting. We have Evan Birch on as going to be our guest today. Evan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Corey and Satch. I'm excited to have a good chat today and kind of talk mindset, which is awesome. So I guess I'll just kind of go into a little bit of my background. So I am been in emergency services for 2 decades, between air ambulance, call taking, dispatching, fire, EMS, stakeholder liaison pieces with some of the larger departments in our area. And I'm an ultra marathoner. So mindset comes very second nature to me with going further and further. Since 2017, I've gone from basically my first 30K, and then last September was a 200 miler. So I've definitely exceeded my distances and pushing myself further and further. And I think mindset plays into that a lot. I'm a father, friend, partner, and just similar to Satch, I'm kind of transitioning out of emergency services after that 2 decade career, and healing mentally and physically as well from all that. And I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Awesome. I can't believe 2 decades. It seems to be a common theme on this podcast here. Seems we get 2 decades in and then decide to start taking care of ourselves and moving forward. So very interesting. A lot to unpack there. I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of background. You said that obviously emergency services and air ambulance. So what got you into air ambulance? What got you into emergency services?
Yeah, so coming out of high school, I was very interested in kind of the kinesiology, physiotherapy world, and I ended up not having the grades to get into school right away. So I decided to kind of get a little bit more experience. I kind of loved the anatomy, physiology, human body aspect of it. So I decided to go and do my emergency medical responder course. And the two instructors there happened to be flight paramedics for Stars Air Ambulance. So we kind of talked about how volunteer work and those types of things can look really good on the resume and kind of give you more exposure to the industry. So I ended up going to volunteer at Stars, and 6 months later, I ended up starting there at the low end of the kind of totem pole and registering oil and gas sites for emergency response planning. And I slowly worked my way through the organization, did my EMTA, so emergency medical technology advanced, I guess, at that time. So kind of right between paramedic and EMR. And I fully expected to become a paramedic and ended up staying in dispatch and call taking, and ended up working my way through Stars, and ended up kind of running the center, leadership roles, supervisor roles. Kind of did everything under that umbrella for 12 years at Stars before I moved over to 911.
Awesome. And just for our listeners, I know what Stars is, but what is Stars?
So Stars Air Ambulance is a nonprofit air ambulance organization that originally started in Calgary, and they started with Calgary and then Edmonton bases when I first started in 2005. And now they are across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, so 7 bases total between the 3 provinces. And they are, again, a nonprofit air ambulance organization that basically fly the sickest of the sick and the critically ill and injured between, car accidents, hospitals, you name it. So dealing with kind of that sickest of the sick population, that kind of upper 10%, I would like to say, like it's like a 90-10 rule type thing.
Yeah. Now you also mentioned as well ultra marathoner, which is interesting because it seems like the more I know Such, the more I know ultra marathoners, which was sort of an anomaly when I first started doing all this stuff. But what brought you into that? Was that something that you were always interested in, or is this a recent passion that you're getting into?
Yeah, so that's actually where Satch and I kind of connected, I guess, over the last couple of years, is through his kind of drive to take on running. And we connected and gone on a couple of runs together and met in Calgary. And For me, ultra marathon. So I've been trail running since my early 20s, so almost 2 decades as well, for just shorter distances. And then it was in 2014, 2015 when I decided that after playing fairly high level competitive soccer for since I was 5 years old, that I wanted to do a sport that was just for me. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do yet, but I decided to put myself into off road triathlons. So for those that don't know what that is, it's an open water swim in a lake, usually wearing a wetsuit because it's pretty cold in Canada most of the time, unless you're on the coast. It's a mountain bike and a trail run, and you can either do half distances or full distances. So I signed up for 6 kind of half distance off road triathlons in my first year, having never really swam competitively as a kid, and taught myself how to, swim fairly well within 6 months. My legs always sink, but hey, I'll take it for what it's worth. And swimming was not my forte. The bike I could manage on. I was usually middle of the pack, but I realized quite quickly that the trail run, I was always placing like top 10, top five, podium on the actual trail run aspect of the off-road triathlons. And at that point, I was slowly deciding like, okay, well, there must be something here. I don't really want to keep doing the swimming. So I ended up kind of between 2016 and 2018. My 2 daughters were born, so I have 2 girls, age 6 and 8. And so I kind of dabbled a little bit between there, but obviously raising 2 young kids at that time is, kind of keeps you close to home most of the time. So I ended up dabbling a little bit, registered for the Golden Ultra, which is a 3-day stage race just in Golden, British Columbia. And it's the first day is like a vertical kilometer. The second day was a 30 kilometer, and the third day was 20 kilometers. And that was the half distance one of it. And I absolutely fell in love with ultra marathons at that point. I wanted to go further and further. So my first kind of ultra would be considered for most people anything over 42 kilometers. I like to say anything over 50, but just to kind of differentiate between the two, between a marathon and an ultra. But my first one was Iron Legs Mountain Races in Kananaskis country. It was a 60 kilometer ultra, and probably has the most elevation of any short distance ultra that I'm aware of, even to this day. Completely destroyed me, wrecked me. I was able to place 10th in the race, but it was humbling, and it just lit a fire under me to just keep going. But it was, it's interesting how my time between switching over from stars to 911 coincided with me increasing distances in my running. Probably not for the healthiest reasons, I will say now, but we can get more into some of that mindset stuff later and how that came
I have
about.
a quick question for you, Evan. You said that you fell in love with ultra running. Why did you fall in love with it? What was it specifically that enamored you, that got you excited?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the answer back then versus now, because I think it's two different answers now. So back then, when I first got into it, it was just being out in the mountains and in nature, because working in emergency services, you guys can attest to, you're very much beholden to everybody else. Everybody is calling you for assistance, or like you're always giving. Whereas this was a way for me to give back to myself and give me something to look forward to. And little did I know that I was using it as a distraction and a coping mechanism. I know that today. I didn't know that then. So unconsciously, that's what I was using it for, because it put me in the mountains for 6 hours and I didn't have to talk to anybody. They had no cell reception. And, back then there wasn't, people were using satellite trackers, but not to the extent they are now. And you could go into the mountains for 6 hours, and the only person that you would talk to is maybe your running partner, and that's it. So I think for me, that was what it was. It was the ability to push myself and see what I was capable of at the same time as it was a distraction.
How about now?
How long did that take you to, like you say, you realize that now, but how long was it into sort of the start of your career there with ultramarathoning? Did you all of a sudden realize that?
I didn't realize until I'll throw this out there. So in January 2022, I finally asked for help. I was in a downward spiral for the 3 months prior, stopped running, stopped taking care of myself, panic attacks, night terrors, you name it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was always the type of person that was deemed as leaving work at work. And everybody was so amazed at how I could just like, compartmentalize myself to be able to be like, no, I left work there. Like it's sitting there, and little did I know how much I was actually carrying with me, just again subconsciously without even realizing it. So wasn't until I actually asked for help and went into some intensive therapy, quickly diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety, within kind of the first week of seeing my psychologist. And it took probably a good 7 months into going through therapy and figuring out that I was running from a place of wounding and not a place of worth, is the way that I like to describe it for, if people are asking. And the way I say that is place of wounding is, not dealing with the traumas and the calls and the events and everything that is happening in real time. And now coming from that place of worth of like self-love, joy, the like just doing it because I actually enjoy it now, as opposed to doing it to kind of, I guess I would say, like, give myself a little bit of pain in a way to, because ultra marathons are not, they're not the most comfortable of situations all the time. And I think doing that kind of like soothed the traumas that I wasn't dealing with at the time until, again, you go to therapy and you completely crack yourself open. It took, like I said, but it was probably about 4 months before I was actually fully trusting enough to really open up and surrender to the process, because I like to say I was trying to win at therapy.
Yeah.
I was, I'm a very competitive person, and trying to win at therapy is no way to do therapy. You either have to give in to the process of it and put yourself fully out there. Otherwise, it's just not going to work, and it's going to be a long, drawn out process. So that's I guess the backwards answer to your question, but I'm sure there's going to be more coming from that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think that obviously our outward personas, especially our digital outward personas, and I know Such and I have talked about this on previous podcasts. Somebody looks at you and they're like, ultra marathoner, looks fit, looks like he's got everything going on, but as you said, you were running from a place of wounding, right? At the beginning of all of this, and while we associate activities with health, it doesn't mean that we're doing it for healthy things, and I think that's something our listeners really need to focus on, especially if they're starting their own journeys as to how and why they're doing certain things. Like, it's great. Obviously, it's better than sitting on the couch. But if you're doing it for the wrong reason and don't realize it, it might be just as destructive as not doing it, at least in my opinion. Such, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I met Evan in April of 2022. So he
Mm,
was in the beginning, I guess, well, we were both in the beginning of our healing process at that time. And yeah, I mean, I can relate to him. The first year I started running, it was, kind of that too, right? Like managing my mental health, trying to stay away from the negative vices, i.e., drinking or various other things that you can do. And so for me, I was running, man, I don't even know what I was doing, but I was running to manage my mental health and as a coping mechanism. So I 100% can relate to Evan. And then when I met him in April of 2022, we met at a backyard ultra in Salmon Arm. And I had no clue about, who he was or anything like that. But he approached me and we started having a conversation and we connected right off the bat through that initial conversation. And I'm so happy that he did, because look at where we are now, man. Like 2 years later, and we're having a conversation about us meeting 2 years ago and sharing some of our experiences through running. So I'm really stoked that we were able to do that and come out the other end, um, to a certain degree, in a positive way.
yeah. I think that's also very important to think of, is looking back and understanding where you've come from. But Evan, for you, other than therapy, Was there anything else that you were doing when you were starting to discover this that helped you along your journey? Just for our listeners and maybe somebody who's at that beginning stage where they're maybe making healthier choices, but they're still not dealing with the underlying issue. Is there anything else other than therapy that you were doing that they themselves could also maybe do or use to help them on this journey?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess I like to use my parallel with running just purely because it has gone in such lockstep with the way I felt and the way I've experienced my life up till now. Um, and really, I like to think about it and kind of when you were talking about like moving towards other vices and other things. And I believe like all destructive behavior comes from an ability, like an inability to feel. The number of people that I hear who like can't get out of their mind and into their body, and actually like if you say like, "What are you feeling?" and they just go like, "I don't know," and that's a place that I was at. I didn't know how to feel. I throughout my career I had to teach myself how not to feel in order to do the work that I was hired to do or chose to do through the companies that I worked for. Um, but if I were to say, the other modalities and other things that I used, I have a really good friend who actually I do a bi-weekly Instagram live with, just kind of talking about ultra running for half an hour. We just pick a topic, and we've been friends. We met during the pandemic that was going on, and met through Clubhouse. I don't know if either of you are familiar with that Clubhouse app. It was like similar to like podcasting, but it was like almost like a radio show, and you kind of brought people up on the stage. It was all audio. But him and I became really good friends through that, and he's very entrenched in the backyard ultra world. He's won 2 or 3 events like Ohio Backyard, and he almost made it to Big's Backyard, which is kind of like the world championship of the last man standing events. And him and I connected, and I knew right off the bat if I wanted to get back to running after I had not really been doing it for 2 to 3 months after I actually went to seek help. I knew that I was in no place to hold myself accountable. So I asked him if he would coach me for that year, to have some accountability. And had I not done that, I don't know how that year would have gone, just purely because I had somebody being that cheerleader, that person. So, the first thing I would say is, and I like to always say is, find your people now before you need them. That's a huge thing for me, and making sure that I have those people around me. So if something does happen, they're there already, as opposed to something happening and you've now pushed every single person that you care about away, because of what you've been experiencing and going through. So that's number one. I would say is a big one for me, is make sure you find that tribe of people that can support you. Second one, so I made the decision right off the bat, in concert with my coach and medical healthcare team, that I wasn't gonna go the route of medication. I was maybe sleeping 2.5 to 3 hours a night, and they were trying to obviously recommend sleeping medication and those things, and I took the prescription, never filled it. I believe that exercise, as we were talking about at the beginning, exercise, if you use it as a tool to help with those things, I believe it is. And again, I don't want to push people away from medication, because I do believe there is a purpose for medication for a lot of people, because it gets you to the point of being able to talk about your problems for some. For me, exercise was the number one thing that I believe that got me through everything. I went to a sleep behaviorist who specialized in athletes, helped immensely with my sleep. I met with him once a month for the better part of a year and a half. I did acupuncture, I did massage, I did so many different modalities. And I think and breath work is another one. Until you try these things, you don't know what's going to work for you. So just like put yourself out there and try to do as many of these things as possible, because you don't know what's going to land for you.
Yeah, we talked about this. Such and I talked about this with Devin Kennedy, regarding sleep and how important that was. Of sort of the three, we were talking about sort of the 3 points of health and things like that, and how we take sleep for granted because it's something that just happens naturally technically in our lives. But I've found that over the last almost 2 decades, my sleep has been atrocious. And I keep thinking that all I need to do is get to bed earlier. All I need to do is do this. And I didn't take the time to work on my sleep and to get better at it by seeking out experts, trying different things, even if I didn't think they'd work. That affected everything that I was doing. And I know Such and I talked about this so much and agreed that it was so important because we just went, it's like breathing. It's something I should be able to do. I'll just get it right, and then everything will work out. So obviously, as you said, that's something you were working at with your specialists and stuff like that. And obviously now I assume you're probably sleeping better and doing better because of that.
Oh, without a doubt, and the number of people that I've been able to help just with the knowledge that I have, I'm actually looking at getting some additional certifications myself, because I think, as I step into the ultra marathon coaching world, I know, again, with ultra marathons, sleep deprivation is a massive piece of this puzzle, which I actually think has helped me having 20 years of emergency services under my belt.
Mm.
I can go for a long time without sleep, which is a good and a bad thing. But yeah, I think, even my sleep behaviorist, his name's Dr. Jonathan Charest. I think he's out in Quebec now. He ended up moving, but his the way he describes sleep isn't something you do, it's something that happens to you. So it's something that you need to have proper sleep hygiene habits and those types of things. And the age old saying of your day starts the night before. So if you're not setting yourself up for success the previous night, well, that's just going to parlay into your next day. And again, there's so many other things that can affect your sleep, especially with people that are experiencing PTSD, trauma, depression, anxiety, anything within that realm. And again, not just the mental health aspects, but even physical health. There's so many things, and between the breath work that I've done, the sleep behaviorist, I have so many tools to pull from now that I don't feel stuck when I'm having an issue, because I can just go into my toolkit and choose something and just practice it for 10 minutes, whatever it is. And those are not tools that I think back, if I were to think 20 years ago, what tools was I given moving into a profession at 18 years old that my brain's not even developed until I'm 26. The number of tools that I didn't get then that I wish other people could have now as they start their careers. And I don't know if you guys can attest to that, but I think there's a big gap in there. There's a lot of, here's some education, go and read about it, but there's very little practical instruction being given. And I find that that's a big barrier for a lot of people. If you just give them a book, well, they don't really know where to go with it. But if you give them practical instruction of here's how to do it, here's 10 things to do, and you're actually doing it with them in a course or something like that, it's very different than that. I think it's like experiential learning, and really actually doing it and actively doing it, I think, is a big barrier right now in the industry.
Yeah, we were talking about obviously, like I said, sleep before, but sleep is the canary in the coal mine. When you're starting to have difficulty sleeping, it may not be a mental thing. It may be a physical thing. It may not be a physical thing. It may be a mental thing, but you need to figure it out. Like, I'm not talking about you have a bad night's sleep, but if it's consistent and it's starting to affect you, you got to look at it like that. Like I said, that canary in the coal mine, something is off and it's affecting you, and it's expressing itself in an inability to sleep. Such, have you found your sleep? I know we talked about it. How have you found, just to get off on a tangent here, how have you found your sleep since you've sort of started transitioning out? It's improved, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's improved. I mean, there's a bunch of things that improve it, but I think just thinking about what Evan was talking about, and I think for me, a lot of the things started getting better. Like Evan was talking about trying to find people, like-minded people, find your tribe, and a lot of these things do help. And I think for me, it all started with me in the sense of I didn't even know what kind of person I was, like truly who I was as an individual. And so part of my issue was I thought I had the correct people around me, but I didn't even know who I was to begin with. So until I started unpacking things, understanding what kind of person I was, understanding, okay, it's okay to be like this kind of person, then organically the right people started coming into my life. And then from that one part, anxiety starts decreasing, depression starts decreasing a little bit there. And then, maybe you're sleeping a little bit better. You're eating better, which is helping with the sleep. You're maybe exercising, which is also helping with the anxiety, which is also helping with the sleep. So it's multi-layered to improving the sleep, not just, okay, I'm going to sleep at this time every single night. How do I set myself up for the day? And how do I, not even like tomorrow, but like today, first thing I get up in the morning, okay, how am I going to set myself up for tonight?
Mm-hmm.
you know and and the best thing that ever happened to me was entering in a mindset of a professional athlete, because if people adopt a professional athlete mindset, and obviously not, you don't have to be a professional athlete, but the mindset of a professional athlete, man, I think a lot of things can be helpful, because professional athletes observe everything that they do and reflect upon everything. Is it working or is it not working? And if it's
Mm-hmm.
not working, we kick it out and then we try to implement whatever's working. So for me, that mindset's helped me everywhere, like interacting with people, sleeping better, training, eating, like all the things. So um, I think if people want to improve their sleep, just like anything else, they have to take a step back and objectively look at what their life is like now,
Yeah.
and then piece by piece addressing it. So it's not a quick fix, man. It's a journey, it's a process, it's the rest of your life. Like, I'm not done trying to fix my sleep. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still
Yeah.
I'm still working on it, and trying to improve it all the time, because you're constantly reflecting.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point I want to touch base on, which is if it's not working, get rid of it. So I know my problem is I think that I'm working towards something. I think I'm getting better, but what I realize is I'm still holding on to the thing that isn't working because just in case I'm scared about the new thing. So just in case that doesn't work, I'm going to have this hold back of this thing that isn't working. It's like holding on to the dock but trying to get into the boat at the same time. Like how successful are you going to be if you're doing that? So a really interesting point there, Evan. I also and I'd love to have such as input on this. You also brought up another point there first, which was the accountability side of things. And as somebody I know, such is training people and teaching people and coaching them as well. How were you for the accountability side? Because we always say we want somebody to hold us accountable, but man, I will tell you, when anybody tries to hold me accountable, I'm immediately like, I'm doing it, what are you talking about? I'm a horrible person to hold accountable, but I'm probably the most needing of somebody to hold me accountable. So when you were first starting with that and you were getting somebody to hold you accountable, how did you find you were with that? What were some of the challenges there?
I think you have to put your ego aside. I think that's the number one piece, that friction and that confrontation is because it's out of the norm, it's unknown, and the unknown scares so many people more than the known, because it's the evil. You're like, well, I'm doing this, and it's working for me, even if it's just like the most minute amount, and you want to go here, and you're like, but I'm so comfortable over here. And I think that's the piece. I mean, life has become so comfortable for so many people in a lot of ways, and putting yourself into discomfort, like our natural survival mechanisms are like, please don't do that to me, because you're going to revert in your brain, and your brain's just going to try to protect you. So I think that was the piece that I kind of struggled with at first, was letting that ego go and knowing like, okay, you can't do this for yourself right now, so the best thing you can possibly do is like offload that to somebody else who you trust, that you've basically said, take the reins. I'm like on the accountability train with you, and I need you to drive it for me right now, because I'm an absolute mess, and I need to deal with these other things over here because they're so much more important, and you can't do those things for me. But somebody building a calendar for me to say, here's when you're going to run. And even now, like I've started coaching a few people, just close friends, just to try to build up my methods. And my main focus is intention versus perfection.
Mm,
The schedule is the intention. You're setting the intention with the schedule. But to have, shame and guilt attached to missing a run or any of these things, I'm like, no, like put that to the side. It doesn't serve you to beat yourself up even more about not going on a run. And to be honest, I'd rather you not go on your run because you're going to mess up my training plan that I built for you because you're going to try to do 2 back-to-back runs and you're not going to be able to do them. And then you're going to get sick and and it's going to just snowball. So I think the intention needs to be there versus always thinking that you like have to do it perfectly
Right.
every single time, because it's the consistency, and with the consistency you add that progressiveness into it as well, and that's going to be what gets you there. It's not, and I know Sasha talked a lot about this too when it comes to motivation, and just relying on motivation by itself isn't going to get you there, because how do you, like, you can't just say one day like I'm motivated, but what got you there? Like, what building blocks did you put in place ahead of that to get you towards that? Like, I'm motivated now. Have you done, built a schedule, built a training plan, started changing your diet and putting these blocks in place? So that accountability piece, the intention, perfection, I think those all kind of for me encompass the same feeling and the same thought of how I was feeling back then and what my coach did for me and what I believe other people sorely need, and maybe they don't know they need it, but that's where I'm gonna push myself forward and help people recognize that might be a path for them too.
Such what and more importantly, when you've been coached and are coaching people, how are you getting over those accountability challenges where somebody is putting up roadblocks and maybe even unconsciously not knowing that they're not taking accountability for stuff?
Mm. So I'm not for everyone. So let's just start off there, right? Having said that, so when I started running, I started from zero. Like I didn't know anything. And so I just did my own research. And I think my own mental dysfunction and some of my own issues held me myself accountable. Now, I'm not sure if it was entirely positive how I held myself accountable, but I did hold myself accountable when I didn't have anyone coaching me. Now, having said that, um, my my methods weren't the greatest, so I probably didn't improve my running. Having said that, but now when I got a coach, my run coach is Ron Lowen, who's not an ultra marathoner, but he's very fast and he's a marathon type of guy and 10K half marathons and all that kind of stuff. And for me to be um, be held accountable, I have to respect the person that I'm putting in that position to guide me. So if I'm choosing the person, I'm going to vet them properly. I'm going to make sure that they're the type of person that I'm going to respect and respect their input and appreciate it. So right off the bat, I think there has to be a respect factor. And another person that kind of assisted me through my process was Sean Taylor. And look, man, Ron Lowen and Sean Taylor are both really good in their spaces. And even I was an ass towards them. So my ego is so large and ridiculous that with those types of pedigrees, I was still chirping. So for me, I understand the type of person I am, and I need certain types of people around me to be able to hold me accountable. So I shut myself up real quick. Now, the type of people that I would like to coach are people that I ensure that are all in types of mentalities. And if someone is going to engage with me, I probably won't take them on if they aren't that type of mindset. And, there is a pretty quick sort of determination when you have a conversation if they're going to be like that or not. Or they decide it's not a right fit after however long. Now, having said that, I think being held accountable, I think either way, if it's from a coach or I'm being coached, it's full transparency and honesty throughout the entire process and having that dialogue. So when, like I've been saying, if someone misses a workout and all these types of things, yeah, you don't want to beat yourself up, man. Right? You got to have that conversation, because if you're beating yourself up, well, now you're getting stressed out. You might affect the next day, and it all kind of is a spiral effect. And there were times when I would miss a run, or I would have like childcare, this, that, and the other, and I would be like, oh man. And I had to have a conversation with my coach, be like, hey man, this is what's going on. And he would make me feel good about it. He'd be like, yeah, it's all good, man. We'll just rearrange a couple things and it'll work out. All good. So the consistency, like Evan was talking about, is super important, because it's like a brick in the wall, right? It's like as long as you have time on your feet and you're executing against a certain degree of fitness, things will come together. You just got to be held accountable and consistently do the thing over and over and over again.
Super important. Now I want to, and by the way, I always love the fact I add that little like super important or that's interesting. I love going back and editing these things for just these gold nuggets that I keep adding, by the way. I am aware of it. So I wanted to sort of draw us in 30 minutes in, but I wanted to draw us in on something that Evan was talking about previously, which is mindset. And I think that's something that's super important. I really want to talk to Evan about this as well as you, Such. But what brought this on, not only just because Evan is passionate about it, was something a friend to the podcast here, Seb Lavoie, posted something where he said, obstacles don't block the path. They are the path. And I think that demonstrates mindset about as clear as I think I can articulate it. So, Evan, I know as somebody who's passionate about mindset, what does mindset mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I know everybody's going to have a different view of this. And again, my perspective comes from my experiences. So obviously, through shared experience in my running and, managing, emergency services careers and all those things, it kind of comes down to, what you're willing to put yourself through. Are you willing to put yourself into discomfort, knowing that, well, I believe that, the harder something is, the more value we place on it. So, if I'm going to, say I'm going to go run a 10K this week, but then I'm going to run, 50K the following week, I'm automatically going to attach to that 50K, even though both of them are going to result in, let's say if I podied in both of them and I got third place in both, well, there's not really much of a difference there when it comes to either of those. It's just I place a higher value on the thing that I deemed harder. So I think for me, it's wrapping your head around the fact that like mindset is a very it has to be like an intrinsic motivation, and doing something that's hard just because it's hard is no different than doing something easy just because it's easy. And I go back to that like comfortable situation again, where there's a lot of people that are too afraid to put themselves into that uncomfortable spot because they haven't developed their mindset towards it. And mindset has to build over time. It's again same thing with motivation in my mind. It doesn't just happen overnight. It's through the consistency and the progressiveness of, I'll use my running career as an example, going from 30K up to 200 miles. That didn't happen overnight. That's happened over a 7-year span. And my mindset, like when I stood at the start line of that 200 miler, you wouldn't believe it, but that was the calmest I've been at the start of any race in my entire running career. Whereas you think it would be the opposite, but it's because I've gotten myself to the point of understanding, like, you've been here before, you know what you're doing, go back into your toolkit and move forward and you'll figure it out. So that's what it is for me. I'd love to hear what Satch has to say about it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Satch?
I agree, but I want to explain mindset through a story that I'll try my best to see if I can make this work. Bear with me. So yesterday I went to jiu-jitsu. I was teaching the kid classes at the school I volunteer at here. And at the end of the classes, the adult class was coming in. And they were getting ready, no-gi class. And there was a woman there. I don't know her name, but I overheard her talking. Oh, I was running and, under 2 hours and this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, hey, did you just run a half marathon? So I just kind of heard her talking about it. And she was like, yeah, I ran a half marathon. I was like, awesome. So I started asking her questions. I go, okay, was it your first time? She's like, yeah. I go, how'd you do? And she's like, I ran it in 1 hour and 55 minutes. I was like, man, that's awesome. It's your first time, right? And she's like, yeah, my first time. I go, did you train for it? And she's like, yeah, I trained 11 weeks. It was this, that, and the other, so hard. I was like, man, that's so awesome. When's the next one? She's like, I'm never doing it again. Right. And then I started thinking, why not? And this is where mindset comes in, right? And I was like, why not? And she's like, "That was the hardest thing I ever did." And I felt like I was going to die, and I gave it all, everything. And at the end of it, I was on the ground, and I was like, "Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it?" And she's like, "What?" I go, "Think about all the amazing things that you learned over those 11 weeks of training. Think about how you grew through that process. Think about, you just did something you never thought in a million years you could do, is run a half marathon, number one, and then a half marathon in under 2 hours." That's just reframing, changing the perspective, getting them to see all the benefits and not focusing on the crap part, which was like half an hour after the run. So let's focus on the positives, all the amazing things that you accomplished through those 11 weeks. And oh, yeah, it was kind of hard, but that illustrates the quote by Seb, that it is, the path is the hard, because unless you go through that, you're not going to learn how to overcome the difficulty. It can be a 200 miler. It can be a PhD that you're studying for or whatever. It can be a relationship. You chase adversity at every opportunity so you can learn from it. So if you have the mindset of, I want to learn from this opportunity rather than, oh, this opportunity is going to crush me, you just reframe it. That's kind of how I think of things.
Interesting. I know when we had Dave Proctor on and he talked about his run across Canada, how elated he was and sort of the mindset that he had afterwards, that he wanted to turn around and start running back because he just never felt like, what he'd felt at the end of the run. But then he described afterwards about the depression, the downside of things that you don't see, and how his mindset shifted afterwards, and how negative it was and how much he needed to pull himself out of that. Evan, have you found in your pursuits that has been something that's happened afterwards?
I would say early on when I was doing shorter trail runs, my whole goal was to get on the podium. My goal was to beat people. My goal was to be the fastest. That was my goal. And to not look back on it and go like, oh, I shouldn't have thought that. Well, I thought that because that's what I believed was the intent of racing and running and doing all these things. And now I'm coming from a very different place, obviously, going through a lot of therapy and other things, and having that impact not only my personal life, but also my running situation. And I believe that this is when people focus on the outcomes versus the process. If you are so tied to the outcome at the end of the day, that when that race finishes and you talk about like wanting to be back there, and the number of people that I've talked to that the race finishes, and what people don't realize is when you go through that, and let's say I run that 200 miler and I finish it, that race is done and now it becomes a memory. What do you do after that? So what do you have to fall back on? So I'm a big believer of systems and processes over goals. I know a lot of people are very goal oriented, but a goal is like a very finite thing. Once you finish it, it is done. But if you focus on everything that comes, like Sash was saying in that story, if you focus on that 11 weeks and go like, okay, I've done all this. Okay, now I'm going to have the race. Like my race plans include the build up, the training, the race, the recovery, and then the next phase afterwards. Like that I fully encompass that, whereas a lot of people will build up, build up, build up. There's the race date, and it's like a wedding. It's like one day and it's done. You're like the race is over, the wedding is over, and then what do you fall back on at that point? And the other side of this too is, and I don't want to generally speak for everybody with an emergency service, but I think there's a large number of us that self-identify as our jobs because we're very service driven. And if somebody asks you at a party, what do you do? The first thing that always used to come out of my mind was like, oh, I'm a dispatcher at Stars, or I work at 911. It wasn't, my name's Evan and I'm a good friend and a kind person. And it was always like describing what I did, not who I am. And if you tie your identity too closely to something, whether it be a runner or, emergency services personnel, and in my case, for both, literally, like with my career with emergency services, as soon as it was basically you're not allowed to go back because of what's happened to you, you feel like everything is gone. your whole situation, and this is what comes back to the Rasach was saying, like, he didn't know who he was. Same thing here. I had no idea who I was because I was only an emergency services
Mm,
personnel. Or when I stopped running for those 3 months, I was only a runner. Now what am I? My running's gone. So I will never in my existence go moving forward self-identify and tie myself so closely to my identity as being what I do versus who I am, simply because of that. And I think those pieces, when those races happen and you end up getting to those endpoints, that's how quickly it can disappear if you don't have those systems and processes and focus on that versus an outcome, because an outcome is so fleeting.
mm-hmm.
How do we transfer? So, but some of our listeners obviously are not ultra marathoners or the like in their own fields and things like that. How do we transfer from something that's simple to understand, which is I have a goal. This is what I'm going to do. This is a process I'm going to do it. And I've never done it before. So when I get to it, it's going to be the penultimate thing that I've done. It's going to be the pinnacle. And once I reach that, what they don't know, and I know certainly in my life when I've done something like that, I get to the top of the mountain, literally in some cases, I stare out at the vista and I go, is this it? Like, this is what I worked for?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that the experience wasn't good, but it's like, this didn't solve anything. I got to the top of the mountain. This was supposed to be everything, and it didn't solve anything. Now what? So where do we shift, or how do we shift to help our listeners from a goal-oriented thing, which we can visualize, right? This is what I want to do. This is going to solve my problem. This is going to mean I've made it, to then going to what you're saying, which is more the process-driven side of things. How do we transfer that
Yeah.
in an easy way?
So I think, sorry, I'll just jump in real quick here, so I can get this off my mind. um, and I agree with what Evan said there. I mean, it makes total sense. And I remember when we were talking to Dave, I was like, oh man, he felt so depressed, and I can understand that feeling. I felt that before too. But I think there has to be a shift into, you know, um, okay. So I created a mission statement for my life, right? And everything I do, fitness wise or not, is based on that mission statement. So, running across Canada next year and attempting to break the record, if I do it, that's just a part of the rest of my life. It's not like that's not the only goal. So for me, I've created this mission statement. I want to maximize my skill sets for everyone around me so that I can affect permanent positive change. Okay, so that's my mission statement. So that doesn't change until I die. So if I'm doing things, okay, I run across Canada, that's done. Okay, what's the next thing I want to do? Well, maybe I want to maximize my education to a certain degree, or maximize my skill set so I can be better for everyone around me. So now I'm going to do that. And then that's the next goal. So as long as you have an underlying theme, and then, at least for me, and then throw in the goals all over the place and you achieve the goal, now you go into the next one. It's just, for me, it's like the rest of my life. It's not like one thing that happens next year, it's forever. Now, I think what people miss is that, look, we're alive for whatever the years are. There is no retirement. There is no when do I take a break. There is no none of that. It's always how do I continue to be better. At least that's how I think. And I think it's a benefit to think that way because you're always growing. And if you're always growing, that shows everyone around you that it's possible for them to grow too. And I think there's something to be said about that, man. Living a meaningful life rather than a life that's empty. And I had an empty life a few years ago, and I got to that mountaintop, and I'm like, what's next? And we all get there, right? And I got to a point where I was like, man, I'm just waiting to die now. Like, I mean, is that all? Until you find that meaning.
Yeah. Evan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, quote kind of comes to mind that I like to use a lot is values are the motive behind purposeful action. So when Satch is talking about his mission statement, that really speaks to me about values and what are your values and determining what those values are and living your life through those values in everything. So not just saying like, oh, I'm going to live these values through running and then I'm going to have different set of values elsewhere. It's really sitting down and figuring out like who are you, what do you believe in, and what are those values to you in life. Like, do you believe that leaving positive change for people is a value that you want to live, Okay, well then, like, write it down, like actually physically write it down, read it, whatever you need to do to embody that in yourself. That's number one. And the other one would be, everybody thinks that like that next thing is going to be the thing that makes them happy. Like, this thing is going to go to this thing and then that thing. And if you can, like, again, you can't intellectualize your way out of it or towards it. You got to get out of your head and into your body and actually like think to yourself, visualize it for yourself. And like, you can't, what's the best way to describe it? So you, like, people try to think their way out of too many things rather than like recognizing how their body is reacting to a situation or whatever that is. And so I think, don't think that that next thing is going to be the thing.
And
That's the best way I can describe it.
yeah, and I bring up, like, obviously my example of standing on top of a mountain is actually a very real example. So my wife and I, before kids, used to do huge multi-day hikes. You know, the idea that we'd train, we would put the effort in, we would figure out what we were taking down to the ounce of weight and all the rest of it. And it was kind of our thing that we did. And I would spend, or we would spend months training for this, you know, with our gear and doing things kind of like when you're marathon running, you know, you run past your marathon in order to know that you can do it. And I remember thinking at the end of some of this stuff that I would stand there and be so underwhelmed by the end result because it didn't match the months and months and months of effort that took to get there, because I was taking it as the totality of the effort was not somehow matching up to the minute that I was spending there absorbing the end result, and it's somehow being underwhelming. So I know for our listeners, they're very goal oriented. They can understand a goal, but are immediately disappointed when they get to the end of it, because they're thinking like what Such is saying, which is, I have to do this for the rest of my life. This was so underwhelming. I met my goal, and now I need to do it even tougher just to get this underwhelming sort of thing. So I can hear the conversations happening here. But how do we convince ourselves that, again, as Such said, it's the path going there rather than the end result?
Well, yeah, to the story that you're talking about climb the mountain, what you weren't doing was paying attention to every step on the way to the top of the mountain
Mm-hmm.
and taking that all in. You're with your partner. How awesome is that? And you're both doing it together. And you're in the bush and you're listening to the birds and you're watching the water and that's what it means to experience the journey and experience the path. So being present. And man, yeah, I know it sounds kind of woo woo, man. I was that guy who'd be like, what are you talking about? Be present. Well, I'm that guy now. You got to be present. Because I think if you're present and I mean, Evan can attest to this too, man. When I was running the marathons across the province, it was unpleasant. It didn't feel amazing. I felt like garbage. And I wasn't happy much of the time because I was in constant pain. But how do you find the joy in there? You're looking for the joy, not looking at the pain. Because if you're focusing on the discomfort, you're going to feel only discomfort. If you're searching for the joy, you're going to feel joy, even if it's tiny amount. So every opportunity I had, I was trying to stay in the moment. Oh, it's 42 degrees out, but I'm on top of a mountain. Look how beautiful it, like all the things. So you got to take it in, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, totally. Evan, thoughts?
Yeah. Expectations are resentment under construction. That's the way that, again, I'll use your story as the summit portion. You had this expectation that it was going to be this like absolutely amazing thing. And once you get to the top, there's going to be this like euphoric sense of like, I did it. And because it wasn't there, that buildup that you had in there meant the resentment was already coming in of like, oh, this is just like, it's cloudy today and I can't see the mountains. Like, this is awful. Now, I like to believe, and again, I'll come back to the running, but I think this is applicable for life in general. I don't believe in verbalizing negative thoughts, because if you speak it into existence, you give it power. Once it has power, again, if you think about it in the sense of how many times during the day does something happen that you don't actually choose your own thoughts. They just pop up. And like my fiance and I joke all the time now, like if we have some weird random thought that's popped up during the day, we actually like tell one another about it to like put it out there and be like, when that person said this, like I really just like, as bad as it sounds, like I really just like that person has a face that I want to punch. Like it's just like that's the first thought that popped into my head. It's not a rational thought, but we don't actively choose those thoughts for ourselves.
Mm.
So it's don't verbalize the negative. Use it as like a problem solving opportunity of like, okay, if I didn't feel as good on this one, like maybe I need to expand my goal. Maybe I need to, maybe I want to do one of these a month for the rest of the year. And maybe by the time I get to that month number 12 and I've done 12 summits, like I've had tons of friends that they have like they want to do 60 different summits in a year. Like expand on what this is for you rather than like keeping it this like contracted little goal. Like expand on it. Go like, how much bigger could I make this? And how much grander could that be when it's like, oh, I've actually summited 60 mountains this year. Now that is like, when you get to that top of that 60th one, you're going to be like, holy, like I'm at the top of the 60th mountain. I don't care if there's no clouds today, or I don't care if I can see what's at the top. Like I made it. I did this thing. So it's like, think about expanding on it, not keeping it small. Like we give into our smallness so much that we limit ourselves because we don't think it's possible because we've already decided so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I agree 100 because
go ahead. Oh,
what he said there makes
there we go.
a ton of sense because I was just thinking about my experience a few years ago after I ran my first 100K. Man, I was still not happy, man. And organically, I grew it to run across Canada. Now, yeah, okay, that's a bit of a growth spurt, I guess. But for me, I can totally understand what he's saying because maybe some people need to expand what that goal is or grow it even further to accomplish something or do something so that there's more meaning behind it so that they feel at least for me, a sense of confidence, sense of self-worth, a sense of duty, all these different things that maybe we're in the first responder space that maybe when we transition out, those things are gone from us, but maybe we can start implementing those things in our day-to-day life by expanding how we can grow as individuals. So I think if you reach a summit, yeah, maybe it's 10 summits, or maybe it's 20 or 50 or 60, whatever it is. But keep pushing because I mean, man, people are capable of so much. And Evan's so right. Like, we put so many limitations on ourselves. Like, we are capable of just about anything. And I believe that now. Like, I truly believe that, meeting people like Evan, Sean Taylor, Seb Lavoie, like people like that are like doing things that you can't even think of. And they thought of it and they just started moving towards a direction to achieve it. And look what these people have done just with discipline, consistency of effort.
Yeah. And we're our own limiters, right? It's generally never something else external that stops us. It's us anticipating that external thing is going to stop us. So we stop us for a survival thing. Well, I'm not going to do that because I could probably injure myself. Well, you haven't injured yourself yet, but you're already saying I can't do that because I'll probably injure myself or I'm going to look silly.
Sure. And let's say you injure yourself. So what? Are you dead? No. Right? Like, and you learn something from the injury too. If it happens, you frame that differently, so you learn something.
Yeah. But we're so busy all the time self-limiting because we love living in that comfort zone. You know what I mean? And I know Dave Proctor talked about this, but it's that idea of living in that comfort zone because we never, ever want to get out of it because we're comfortable here. And I know Evan was talking about that a little bit as well. So we never, ever get out of it. And then we wonder why our life is somehow bereft of meaning because we've never gone out of this little circle that we have set for ourselves. But I did want to touch base on something Evan was talking about earlier, which is, again, that idea of not just goal setting, but not doing that negative talk. So how do we as a day-to-day person, because I know there's a lot of people in my life where that seems to be literally who they are, is the negative talk. Everything is bad. This is what's happened. Oh my God, did you hear what happened here? And it was horrible. And they want to do that. How do we go from that to eliminating the negative talk in our life, so that we're not breathing that into existence?
Yeah, I had a chance to chat with a sports psychologist, and he terms them ANTS, so ANTS, so automatic negative thoughts. So it's these things that pop up during the day that you don't choose them. They come up. The worst thing you can do is push them away. The most important thing you can do is acknowledge it and like put it out there. Like, do I really think this? Okay, no, I believe this because I think, I'm worried about what people are going to think of me. Like, there's an underlying feeling, and this is where I get kind of come back to around like the inability to feel, I think, is like massive right now. People just have like suppressed it or whatever it is, but not being able to feel and actually think your way through that. Again, it's probably your first thought is probably not what you're actually feeling. There's something underlying to that you have to dig deeper, and you have to be willing to dig deeper. And until you're willing to dig deeper, those thoughts are going to keep perpetuating, because you're actually not, it's like that old thing where it's like, somebody throws, as a kid, I'll use this as an analogy, when you're a kid having a snowball fight, and one kid throws one snowball up in the air to like distract you from it, and then the other kid throws a snowball at you while your eyes are up in the air. Like, that's the way that I see this, is like you're distracting yourself because you're not willing to look at a deeper version of this. So that's the way that I would kind of describe it myself.
Because I know, just from a real world example, I know trying to be a leader to people on my team and stuff like that, and we come in and there's already a challenge. We're short, or we're already in busy right at the start, and the first thing people go is, this is gonna suck, and we know it's gonna suck, but immediately when they say that, I'm kind of thinking like, how do I cheerleader this? How do I change that when they've already decided that this is gonna suck? So I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts as to how, when other people are being negative about themselves in this situation, how do you turn that around?
You have a choice on how you respond. You have zero impact on how they respond. You as a leader, how you respond, especially if you're in a space of leadership, and I truly believe this, how you react is going to bring not everybody along with you. But if you set your intention to go like, okay, guys, like, I know we're short tonight. This happens, whatever, a lot. Like, I mean, working in emergency services, we were habitually short. That's just across the board for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like flipping that on its head. And again, like what Sash said earlier, focusing so much on the negative is going to just bring more negative. I fully believe in like like money is energy, like your effort is energy, all those things. The only thing you have the impact on is the effort you're willing to put in to try to turn them. And yes, that's going to take a lot of effort on your side as a leader, but like, you were put in that position. You chose that position. And if you didn't want the responsibilities that came with that position, maybe that's not the position for you. But that's the way that I look at it, is you set the tone of how everybody else is going to come underneath of that.
Yeah, and think about that for your life as well. You set that tone, right? Everybody else is your team with you, but if you're negative, they're just going to follow along with you. Fantastic. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to share one quick story on changing the thought pattern when it comes to negative thought. It's true, man. Like, if you're thinking negatively, oh, this is going to suck through. You imagine running 100 kilometers in like 90-kilometer winds and piss and rain, and you feel cold as hell. And for however many hours, you're like, oh, this is going to suck. This is going to suck. Well, man, it's going to suck. Right? It's going to suck, man. Of course it's going to suck. That's without saying. But how do you make it not suck? Because you know it's going to be unpleasant. That is a given. If you know you're short-staffed, and you're going on shift and something happened, you know it's going to be a lot of work. That's a given. And Evan's exactly right. The onus is on you to lay the foundation through discipline, how to think properly. And maybe after 6 months or a year of watching you as the leader, maybe one or two of them shift. And that's the goal, right? To get the entire team to shift might not happen, but maybe one or two people, that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Obviously, like I said, we're getting at a little bit over an hour here. I'd love to continue on. I'd love to delve a little bit deeper with this with Evan later on. But final thoughts, Evan.
Yeah, I think mindset. You just need to think of it like when I say like get out of your head and into your body. Mindset to me is not just the using your brain up here. It's using what everything within your body that is connected to your brain. That sometimes making a decision from the heart is more important than making a decision with your head, because this is the part that's actually the feeling aspect of it, attached to everything. So I'm sorry, I lost my head ear pod there. So I think that's the piece for me, is get out of your head and into your body sometimes, and really recognize that, like we've said it all along, we are so much more capable than we perceive ourselves to be. And those like self-limiting beliefs, they don't serve any purpose other than to keep us stuck and keep us where we are, keep us where we're comfortable. And everything we want is on the other side of comfortable. I truly, truly believe that. And it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be easy, but unless you're willing to make that jump into that uncomfortable, unknown space and be willing to learn and grow, you're going to stay stuck. So just take that, dip that toe in the water, take that first jump. There's no right or wrong. It's just a path that you're choosing. It's not, there's no right or wrong. I truly believe that. It's the path you choose is your path. That is it.
Awesome. Such final thoughts.
Yeah, man. I agree 100% with Evan, man. Like it is, everything is within our control. It's not up to anyone else. If anything happens, if life isn't going great, it's your fault. And if life's going great, it's your fault. You have control over all of it. So I think if people truly understand what that actually means, things will start moving in a positive direction once you start executing in that direction.
Awesome. Everything you want is on the other side of comfort. Quote of the podcast there.
Yeah,
One of the things I'd like to sort of do it a little bit of an analogy for mindset is you can be standing inside your house and look out one set of windows and see that it's cloudy, and look out the other set of windows and see that it's sunny. Both are occurring at the same time. What window you decide to look out is entirely within your power anyways. Evan,
true.
where can people get a hold of you, and what do you have upcoming?
Yeah, so primarily Instagram, so just at Ultra Birch, and got a website that's going to be coming up online pretty quick here. And next big event for me is Speed Project Solo, which is 300 miles between LA and Las Vegas. Choose your own adventure, write your own story. It's a very small group of select people that in the running community that have been chosen. 15 to 20 people worldwide are coming out to do this solo attempt. Yeah, so that'll be starting March 25th. So follow my Instagram if you're curious. It'll be all gone live through the Speed Project's Instagram page. And yeah, I'm going to be raising some funds for an organization that's close to me called Bigger Than the Trail. And they provide mental health supports to people within the endurance community and their connections for basically free counseling for a set period of time, and you can get extensions, and all the money goes directly to them and getting people the help that they need. So I'll be raising anywhere from 1 cent up to whatever anybody is willing to donate per kilometer. So 482 kilometers, if anybody is curious. So
Fantastic.
I'll leave it with
we'll
that.
put those links down below for those people to reach out to you. Such, what do you have upcoming?
Yeah, the 30th of March, we have a night to inspire. We have 9 guest speakers speaking on the mental health crisis and speaking from their subject matter expertise, some solutions to counter it. It's going to be catered dinner at the Sandman Hotel. Moxie's is catering the whole thing, music, just trying to do something a little bit different for the community that perhaps has never happened before. And if this goes well, maybe we do some in Calgary, we do one in Toronto, we see if we can take it somewhere. Some of the speakers, I've mentioned them before: Sean Taylor, Seb Lavoie, Civil Core CEO Travis Bader, Cal DeSange, Al DeGenova, president of Honor House, the whole 9 yards. It's gonna be an awesome night. So March 30th, hit me up for tickets, $75.
Yeah, absolutely. Go see Such on his Instagram. Send him a DM. He's put the link in a few times. We'll throw it in again here. From myself, Such, and Evan, thanks very much to all our listeners. Thanks for coming on our journey today. We appreciate it, and we hope you tune in next week. And we'll go from there. Anyways, thanks very much, guys. Talk to you later.
Yes.